The first question I have is a general question. We have obviously seen significant disruptions to ferry services over the past few years, but what I would like to understand better is the real day-to-day impact this disruption has on island communities. So I'd like to ask each of you, what are the day-to-day impacts that you have had to manage as a result of the constant disruptions you have experienced with ferry services? And if I could start with each of you in turn, if I could start with Sam Bourne and then move to Gary McLean, please. So Sam, over to you, please.
Good morning, committee. And firstly, let me commend you for taking on this inquiry. I think we'd all agree that we're now at a very critical juncture in Scotland's ferry service provision, and this inquiry is vital in trying to understand the issues and how we may be able to solve them. So let's think of some of the day-to-day impacts that an island such as Arran suffers. It can't be overestimated and overstated how reliant Arran is on a reliable ferry service. Examples range from residents attempting to get to medical appointments on the mainland hospitals. That's a fairly common tale, particularly difficult during the winter when disruption is inevitably higher through weather and technical issues due to overhaul. That has a huge knock-on effect. For us, our nearest major hospital is Crosshouse near Kilmarnock. To make an appointment, you need to be getting one of the earlier ferries of the day, and to get home again, you need to be ensuring to get on either the afternoon or the evening ferry. If either of those are disrupted, you're either not making your appointment with all the knock-on effect that will have, potentially, or you're needing to stay overnight. It's not unusual to hear stories of residents having to to go a couple of days early to make sure they can make their appointment that may have been waiting for in the current climate 6 months or more, for occasionally sometimes very, very important appointments. So that's just one small example, and it stretches through to the island producers not being able to get their products to market reliably, farmers not being able to get their animals to market. The other way, coming onto the island, goods and services. Suppliers are less keen to do deliveries on the island because of the risk of their drivers and vehicles then getting trapped for a day or more. During January, I think we had one occasion where we had 5 co-op lorries stuck on the island for a couple of days, and that has a huge knock-on effect for the co-op delivery system as well. So there are so many effects throughout the whole community and economy, and we haven't even got to talking about the effect on the tourism and hospitality industry, with the lack of ability for people to be able to plan reliably to come and go on their holidays, which with the modern economies of the island are so tourism reliant, especially on the likes of Arran, that it's an essential economic fact. So that it really can't be overstated how many and varied the impacts are, and I'm sure the other panelists will echo very similar experiences.
Many thanks, Sam. You've raised a number of issues there. Very, very helpful introduction that I'm sure the committee will explore when we get to other questions. If I could ask the same question of Gary McLean, and after that I'll bring in Margaret Morrison. Gary, over to you, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very apt question you've asked, convener, because the Hebridean Isles has actually broken down at the moment. So Isla is now without 3 round-trip sailings for the last 2 or 3 days, if memory serves. So I think the real crux of this is that capacity and reliability are so important to our island community, because at the end of the day, this is very much a lifeline ferry service for the local community. So it's very difficult to assess the impact day to day, other than to echo what Sam has said. I mean, it could be people needing to, local community trying to go to the mainland to fulfill appointments, go shopping, see family, to basically live a normal life that's not impeded by our slightly more remote location. And as for business, I mean, we have 9 functioning whisky distilleries on this island, which requires goods coming in, goods going out, which are all quite time sensitive. So we have a large freight capacity. We require a large freight capacity, sorry. So if any little cog in the machines breaks down, it has a disproportionate effect on everyone else. And in our case, it happens to be the ferries, all too regularly, unfortunately. And with the whisky industry comes tourism, from which a lot of people derive their primary income, either directly or sort of tangentially to it. And if people have a bad experience, they're less likely to come back. If they try to book and there's not availability at a time which is convenient, they will go elsewhere. So I think the disruption is something that really can't be overestimated. I think that's all I'll add just now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gary. You mentioned a couple of important points about tourism, the impact on tourism and business, which we want to follow up on a bit later. Let me bring in Margaret Morrison. Again, the same question about overall day-to-day impact in terms of disruptions.
Good morning, committee members and fellow panellists. In Harris, we are absolutely beyond anxious with constant stream of service withdrawals, which is undermining island life hugely. I have lived here since 1987. I run a business and I'm also an essential worker who has travelled through the islands. And what we're finding is that I have never seen such anxiety amongst population. Visitors coming to the islands who have said to me, we will not return because of the situation with the ferries, which, to be perfectly honest, is utterly chaotic at the moment. We've had service withdrawals in the last fortnight on several of our ferries, which has resulted in visitors either being stuck on one island and not able to get to another, having problems with accommodation being cancelled. And to be perfectly honest, I feel we have met, we have discussed, and we have talked, and we are at a total impasse with CalMac, with the Scottish Government. We get nowhere. We will never see young people coming to our islands to set up business as long as we have this problem. And we are also facing a 6-month closure of our main ferry terminal in Harris, and the impact of that is going to be significant. And we feel that something has to be done because we are, at the moment, even to go off island, you become anxious about booking a ferry because you can't book one. We get told, well, you have the Loch Seaforth in Stornoway. Then when you try to book that, we get told it's full. And then you ask locally to be told you can get availability. So we've got the chaos from the booking system added to the unreliability of the vessels, which are now so old, they are breaking down frequently. And as I've said before, I came here in 1987, and I don't ever remember having those issues with the ferries. Yes, they were weather dependent. We've always accepted that. But this has reached an all-time critical situation. And I feel that the islands of the Western Isles are really at the point of almost extinction of our businesses. And our morale is so low, we have no confidence left in CalMac and the Scottish Government, because they ask us what we want, we tell them, and absolutely nothing is done about it. So the situation here, I cannot stress just how dreadful we are all feeling about the situation with the ferries in Harris.
Well, Margaret, thank you very much for that introduction, and sorry to hear of the impact the community is facing. Let me ask Joe Reade to come in on the same question in terms of day-to-day disruption as a result of ferry services.
Yeah, good morning. Well, I'd echo everything that's been said so far. I think it's important to remember that every island is different, so every island has different problems. They have sometimes very different ferry services. I mean, Mull is a relatively, relatively close to the mainland. We have a relatively frequent service. We're lucky in that regard. But then look, for example, to our near neighbours on Col and Tiree, who have a handful of sailings each week and only one service. And if they have disruption, particularly in the winter due to breakdowns or weather, they're completely isolated for days at a time. Their shelves go bare. It really has a really severe impact, particularly on those small and vulnerable islands. But on all islands, as you've been hearing, the problem is widespread. We have sort of two crises, if you like. In the winter, we have a crisis of reliability. That's when we feel the reliability crisis worst, because that's when all the dry docking is trying to happen. They're trying to squeeze in huge dry dock schedule that often overruns. So we have this logistical Rubik's Cube in the winter, which never runs to plan. We have weather cancellations, which are increasing. The winter, reliability is declining really badly, to the point where people can no longer depend on the service that they used to be able to depend upon. We cannot rely on the service anymore. It's a guessing game often, particularly in the winter. We look at the weather forecast. Will it sail? Won't it? Which ferry is on? What's the likelihood? Should I go on that service or should I go on another? If I've got an important appointment to make, maybe I should go a day early just to be sure of making it. It all adds to the cost of life. It deteriorates the quality of life. It's really appalling. And so we've got that awful situation in the winter, and then in the summer, yes, the reliability issues continue, but actually the summer problem, particularly on the busiest islands, is one of capacity. There's a complete lack of capacity in the system. So whereas in the winter, it's a guessing game as to whether the ferry will sail or not. In the summer, it's a guess, we just know that unless we book weeks in advance, we're not going to get a place because the ferries are full. There just is insufficient capacity. Demand has been stimulated by RET, but absolutely nothing was done to prepare for it. So these problems are not fleeting problems. These are not operational issues. These are strategic failures. These are strategic failures to plan over decades. There's a strategic failure to plan for the impact of RET, a strategic failure to plan for vessel replacement and make sure it's done timeously. The system has been lacking from proper governance and planning over decades, and it's crumbling. 801, 802 is a symptom of a failing system. It's not the cause of a failing system. It really is, pretty dire, and it needs to be assessed from a blank sheet of paper. How could the system be better delivered? Look abroad. Look to the exemplars abroad of the best ferry services. Take the best of them and apply them to Scotland, because Scotland has one of the worst public ferry systems in the world in relation to the amount of money that is spent on it. And that's the other point to make, is that this is not necessarily about needing more money. The sums of money being spent on the ferry service are eye-watering, but it's being spent appallingly badly. The outcome for that money that's being spent is terrible. If you were to look, look at the public money being spent per head or of population or per passenger carried, and compare it with near neighbours like Norway, I think you'll find that it's a really shockingly high figure. And we need to spend our money better, and it's of critical importance to the islands for all the reasons that the other speakers have said. It's really eroding the quality of life. It's making business on the islands far more risky. It's leading to depopulation. You know, people are actually leaving the islands because of the unreliability of the ferry service, because life on the islands is no longer sustainable without that uncertainty and risk of whether they can get on or off the island, and particularly for the most vulnerable, particularly for the elderly or the ill. You know, people who are going for regular cancer treatment who can't get to their appointments, for example. These are the people that are worst affected by this, but then this continuous erosion of the quality of life for us all. Could go on, but I think that's probably enough for me for the moment.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much for that overview. You raised a number of very serious issues there, which the committee will want to explore further. Let me bring in Lawrence Odie, again on the same question, please.
Hello. Sorry. I have lost most of the meeting because my broadband got cut off for a wee while, which is in a rural area. A little bit different. We've had a very good service up until recently, but we do have weather problems in the winter time. But the main problem we have is unreliability because of either staffing or maintenance problems. And it has a big effect on the island where I stay. Most of the younger people under 50 have actually left to the mainland because they had been started commuting on a daily basis to their work, and now they just move out. The other thing is we have a large fish processing factory that puts out almost 20,000 tonnes of salmon per year, and they have difficulty getting out at times. They have to catch the second ferry, the Northling ferry, to get the goods to mainland Scotland. So the whole thing is almost a crisis point here as well.
Okay, Lawrence, thank you very much. I'm glad we were able to get you back online, and your connection was good there. So thank you very much for that introduction. Let me bring in Paul Riley on the same question, the same opening question on the impacts on day-to-day life as a result of ferry disruptions.
Thank you very much, both for the opportunity to speak to you, but also for the opportunity to express the views of, I think, most of the Northern Isles in Orkney, that is. I am on the Stronsey Community Council as a transport rep, but I also have a representation here to speak for Reade, North Ronaldsay, Sandy and Westray, the other islands. Populations range from 50 to nearly 1,000 on each different island. The main problem that we feel exists is that the local ferries and planes in Orkney are akin to the bus rail services in northern Scotland. They're essential. They're not just convenient. In our experience, we have, in particular in our section of Orkney, 3 vessels serving islands. All 3 vessels were built before 1990, all past use-by dates. They're still fairly sound, but when they go away for maintenance, they come back, and within a few weeks, 1, 2, or even all 3 have to go back for further work. This shows the reliability of the service is compromised. And as far as we can tell, no provision being made for this fly of any ferries. Nothing in the pipeline, as far as we're aware, islands. Nothing is being done by Orkney Island Council or by the Scottish Government to take this further. And I would have thought it was fundamentally essential. Having got our ferries, the real, and we have a plane service as well, the question still comes up, anybody with mobility issues. The planes are small, 8-seaters. They are very reliable, very good pilots, as good a service as can be for most of the islands. The ferries, however, have, of the 3 ferries that we use, only one has some sort of disability access, and that is sometimes simply not working because it involves a lift, which apparently can't be used every now and then. So any mobility issues faces a serious problem getting to the island by plane or by sea. I think overall, though the quality of life on the islands is generally good, it depends very much, not only for the current population, but for the future of the islands, very much on the sustainability of the service. And this needs to be addressed, as far as we think this needs to be addressed urgently. Thank you.